Welcome back, everyone, to 101 Questions That Church Planters Ask. I'm your host, Danny Parmelee.
And I'm Chris Highfill.
And today we're going to be answering the question, should I do a launch team covenant? And maybe you don't even know what a launch team covenant is. And we'll answer this question with a very strong maybe. Okay, so let's actually go through a couple of different things, even just explaining what a launch team covenant is and if you should do one and what types of things you should have on there or not have on there. This will be a pretty short episode, don't you think, Chris? I think we'll be able to hammer this out. It'll be short but sweet. It's actually important. There's some important things on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some great content here and important things to consider and think about. I mean, ultimately, you're asking people to join you on one of the greatest endeavors ever to launch a church. And so there has to be some kind of an understanding of an agreement. But what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So this is what I'm going to say is that most of the time, well, actually, let me explain it this way. The launch team covenant is usually this sort of written document that says, hey, if you're going to be on this team, here's what we can, as a church planter, this is what we can expect from you. So you're going to, show up to all the meetings, you're going to tithe, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do it for this amount of time. So this was like a big thing that definitely, as I was coached as a young church planter, hey, you need to do one of these launch team covenants just so that you have clear expectations. I will come right out of the gate and say I'm actually not a fan of launch team covenant. So, and here's why, is that I think that while it helps in setting the expectation, I think that it's a really high kind of entry point. In other words, like you're really asking a lot from people up front. And especially if you're developing a launch team with people that you don't know, developing a launch team with non-believers, it can actually be a barrier, which it was almost kind of set up that way. The idea is like, hey, you want this really strong, committed group of people. And this is just something philosophically that, from me, that I'll even say that was influential in from Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Church. I mean, some listeners probably don't even know who Rick Warren is at this point, but he had this, book, Purpose-Driven Church. And in that book, he talks about these concentric circles. In other words, like there's this launch team or this core team in the middle, and then you have people at differing levels of involvement, and you're just understanding that you're trying to get people towards that center. But many church planners want it black or white. Are you with me or are you not? And that's where people get in trouble. I've had numerous church planners who have said, man, I just want 12 committed people just like Jesus. Just give me 12 committed. I don't care about anything else. And I disagree with that statement. What you're going to find out is that you're going to have multiple people at multiple different phases. There's going to be that person, yes, that you met in Bible college, that, they left their job, they moved, they're raising support, they're on your team. There's also those people that, you met them in the grocery store and they're like, oh, well, once you get started, I'll come and show up. To me, great, awesome. All of those people are on your launch team and everybody in between. Okay, so before we get into kind of some of the specifics and pros and cons, Chris, did you do an actual written launch team covenant? And if you did, why did you? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it?
We did not call it a covenant because I really feel like we have this covenant with God, and if you're married, you have a covenant between you and your spouse. But like, I just feel like covenant, especially you mentioned it earlier, like you're just kicking this relationship off, and you're asking someone to have this covenant agreement with. I do like the term agreement better if you're going to do this. We didn't have something written, but I asked people that were joining the launch team that you would commit to like 3 things. That you would commit to come to our stuff, right? Like that you just be present. Obviously, that's an important thing. That you have a pulse and be alive. That's kind of nice, right? I did ask them to give towards the mission. So we didn't use the term tithing, but we just said, that we'd be growing in the giving journey together. And then there was an agreement that you would invite people. And so that was
That's great.
And then we would hold each other accountable to that. It was very loose. They didn't have to sign. We didn't get a special tattoo, right? Nobody got branded, and it was for 1 year. That was the agreement. And I wish the mistake I made was I wish I would have made it 18 months. That's what I wish I would have done, because at our 1 year birthday, about 25 people left. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
we had a cake and candles. And so 18 month, I think people would have forgot that maybe. I'm kidding mostly, but yeah.
Okay, well, what I love about what you shared is great, because you had an opportunity to set culture, because that's really what you're trying to do. Hey, if you're a part of this launch team, here's the things that we kind of hope that it looks like. You show up to stuff, you give. I like that it's general. Again, I've seen lots of launch team covenants where it's like, hey, this is for the serious people. Tithing. I mean, you're probably not. You're not going to have tithing church members 5 years down the road. So to ask this launch team of new relationships to tithe is just a bit extreme. And then I love the part about inviting people. In other words, this is how we function as a relationship. I think even agreement can be strong. Call it expectations, and maybe it's not this written document that you actually sign, but just something that you're communicating with people. Hey, if you're a part of this team, this is kind of what it looks like, so that they at least have something to kind of put the stake in the ground. But you're not going to people and say, hey, you said you were going to show up at stuff and you missed, so you're off the team. You're constantly wanting to kind of grow that team and understand, as I said before, that you're moving people wherever they are. Maybe they show up to half the things, they only sprinkle a few dollars, and they don't invite people. Well, what does it take for them to kind of, make that journey more towards the middle, to be able to do that?
My struggle is that there's going to be a rule, somebody has to enforce it, and you don't want to be that guy. Like, hey, I noticed you didn't show up tonight. You signed that deal that you would be here, and then you weren't. You want to be open-handed with people, and I think covenant language almost gets a little legalistic from time to time. So you want to be, if the more open-handed you are as a planter, the less desperate you feel, which is way more attractive than, hey, we're on our first date. You want to get married? Like, it just feels weird.
Exactly. Okay, the other thing that you mentioned that I love is time-wise, and here's where I think that the covenant or the agreement, expectations, or the communication is really, really important, is that whole 18-month thing. And here's where this actually becomes helpful. It's not so that you're kind of getting someone to sign up on the dotted line to say, like, now I've got you for 18 months. But the way that you communicate it is, hey, give this a shot. We're kind of asking to kind of, try, being part of this church plant over the next 18 months. And when that 18 months comes up, if this isn't for you, you've got an easy way to kind of say, hey, this is kind of what I agreed to, and now I'm going to continue on. Where this becomes so helpful is when you are recruiting people or having conversations with people who are already a part of either the sending church or even just another church. And so here's what's great about that is you can say, hey, help us for 18 months. And then at that 18 months, you have the opportunity to go back. It actually releases the pressure. So that's what I'm trying to communicate here. The philosophy of it isn't to lock people in or to make them feel obligated, but it just releases that pressure. Because here's what happens. If you don't have that time-bound thing, people will subconsciously even make up excuses, because no one wants to just leave something that they joined. So it's like, well, they're not preaching the Bible, or he's an abusive, spiritually abusive, or whatever. People just make up stuff, where instead you can say, hey, remember at 18 months you kind of evaluate this thing, and if it works for you, great, stick around. If it doesn't, you can move on. No, I know you joked about, man, all of a sudden we had people all leave. In some ways, it's okay. You don't want people sticking around that don't fit, that don't embody the culture, that aren't really there anyways. So
you want lots of on and off ramps, right? Like, and I think as long as you're giving them those off ramps, we lost 25 people, but hey, we it's okay. Like, it was it took me like a week to get over it, but when I was over it, I was over it. I don't think about it until we're having this conversation. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that did sting a bit, but it was good and overall really healthy for the church.
Yeah. So all of that to say, just a couple things kind of wrap up. Whether it's a PowerPoint or some sort of presentation that you're kind of going over from time to time. I think that what you're trying to communicate there more than anything is culture. So even if you do have it, written on a piece of paper, hey, this is what it means for us to kind of, come together to operate as a team. And maybe there's some things on there about relationally, like, hey, we're going to, honor each other in our conversations or whatever, those types of things. Or if it's not actually a written down signed document, that it's things that you're kind of teaching throughout on the launch team covenant. That's probably the way that I would go. The time where it maybe becomes a little bit more important is if you are coming from a sending church and you have a large group of people that are coming from that church, because that's where sometimes having it a little bit more specified is important, because there's sometimes the danger that if you have too many people that are coming from a sending church, they can kind of like take over the whole thing. So in other words, this is what it means to be part of, the launch team. Chris, one thing I know that you talk about in your trainings are, core team versus launch team, just as far as definition. Why don't you just speak to that real briefly, and how from even a philosophy of ministry standpoint, it's not just a term, but what's kind of tied to that.
Yeah, you referenced the term core from the Rick Warren book, right? And the community and the crowd, the concentric circles, and you come to the core. And we'll hear sometimes planters use language like my core team, and it's really important when you think about what you call something, because language builds culture. Okay.
Yes.
And so if someone's on your core team, it's different. You may be meaning the same thing as launch team, but they're gonna, for the rest of their lives, be able to say, I was on the core team, and they'll hang that over your head. They'll hang it on other people's heads. What we love about launch team, what I specifically love about launch team, is like when the church is launched, you throw a hand grenade in that, and you have a little party. Hey, we were the launch team, but check it out. Now we're a church. And so you may be able to say, yeah, I was on the launch team, but it's over with. Like the core team has this thing where it lingers and it's around for a long time, and people feel like, man, I'm on the core team, and you're not going to hear the music's too loud. I'm on the core team. You should listen to me about this, right? Or we should do these kind of Bible teachings. We should start a men's small group. After all, I was on the core team. And it's like they get this really unhealthy ownership. I mean, we really love it when people own the mission of the church, but I think sometimes we nuance things in a way where they have an unhealthy ownership, and they're like, okay, well, I'm just like, I'm the king of this thing, and like, hey, Jesus is king. And that's why we prefer the term launch team over core team, and I know it's a small nuance. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So launch team has a specific purpose, and that's to launch the church, to kind of, start it from absolutely the word core team. Like you said, it could be this long-term thing, an expectation that they're on some sort of long-term leadership. So yes, however you do it, again, whether it's written down, PowerPoint presentation, the bigger thing is just understanding what you're doing. You're giving people an opportunity to enter in to relationship. You want it where there's, a bit of open-handedness. There's opportunities for people to offboard, and that you're not, creating a bunch of rules and legalism and kind of a churchy feel to it right away in the beginning. And sometimes you can unintentionally do that by having this really structured whole bunch of rules on a launch team covenant. Well, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you have a question, you can head over to churchplantersask.com, and you can drop us any of you things that you're working through or challenges. And until next time, keep asking those questions.